So I've got Josh here all the way from Houston area, Houston, Texas. Huntsville, right?
Yeah.
And but Josh and his dad are on their way back to Texas from Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, where Josh just spent the summer. How long?
3.5 months.
3.5 months as an intern in the Anderson Forge and Public Armory blacksmithing shop with some of the best blacksmiths around. So Josh is showing me some really cool stuff, and we've got some really cool stuff to look at that Josh made or partially made while he was there. And this is just a selection. So the hammers you made before you went.
Well, so this one I did. So this is a piece of wrought iron with tool steel on either end. What's neat about the iron is it was found in a creek local to the museum I work at.
That's really cool.
So it was a 80-pound wrought iron wagon axle. So, likely was in use around the same time that my museum was. So repurposing iron like that is pretty neat. This other one's just a little riveting hammer, also
bench hammer.
Yeah, iron and with steel faces on either side. That way, it's nice and cheap, historically speaking, and also nice and strong. And then kind of the theme, at least the beginning theme of my summer, was kitchen utensils. So the first thing I worked on were spoons here. I probably made 10 or so spoons. And there's lots of intricacies to these and just getting them to be a nice, clean shape and just very refined. So I picked up on those, probably the first month I spent just forging spoons.
That's
maybe 3 weeks or so, but
that's
a pretty long time. And then you'll notice on a lot of these other shapes that theme of peening out and stretching material is very consistent. So all these handles that I did.
This is spread, peened out.
Right. Yeah. So this is made from the same bar as this was made from, and so was this.
Now, is this shovel? Is this made from a single piece, or is there a weld in
So
here?
there's two welds. So there's a weld up here at the handle, and then there's another weld down there.
Cool.
So yeah,
and that's spread out from a bar.
Right. Yeah. So again, the same concept of spreading material.
And then, of course, these, you start with something roughly 1/4 by 3/4, 1/4 by 1.
Those were 1/4 by 1.
Okay.
So the one I was copying had a very, very large cusp there. Yeah.
Very cool. So this is like probably 2.5 inches wide, all spread out.
Right. One of the things I notice is how thin they'll get the material there. They're not afraid to really
stretch it out.
Right.
Thin it out. Yeah. And this hacksaw, boy, a period hacksaw has been on my list for a long time.
Yeah, it's certainly a tool you can't find easily today, a historic one.
That's cool. And you even got somebody to turn you a nice handle.
Yeah, so the cabinet shop did those.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And then these trivets.
So
and pretty much every piece, like at some point, you may have been copying someone else's copy, but they're basically copied from originals.
Right. So everything here is copied from one that they had in the shop, other than the trivets here. So the trivets, I actually got to go to collections at Williamsburg and to find a historic example, take measurements, take notes, observe, what can I see exactly. I take a drawing and then try to transfer that to the shop. So this was the closest one I got. The only issue with this is it's probably about 1/4 of an inch too long from this section here. Mm-hmm. But some of the things I saw in the original were some weld seams here, weld seams on the back sides. This is a super, super thin shape right here, and you have to do that before you do the weld. So they had some damage here, and they had some just kind of an awkward flat spot right where I got my awkward flat spot.
So many of the flaws in your piece match the flaws in the original piece.
Right.
So you're getting pretty close to the same techniques or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So very, very cool. Let's go sit down, and I want to hear more about what you learned and what some of your biggest takeaways are. How did this internship change blacksmithing and craftsmanship for you, or did it? Or did it just sort of like refine and cement things you already knew or were thinking about or whatever? Like, I have so many questions.
Yeah. I think my biggest way or takeaway from the internship is probably just the insane level of skill that these smiths have and how it was developed from years and years of practice and repetition. And you
And
know,
also having like practice and repetition, but like also having an unbroken chain of like you're learning from a smith who practiced all his life, who learned from a smith who practiced all his
Right.
life. So even though you might do things differently, you might come up with something new that was better technique wise. Like you've got all of that
exactly, yeah.
to stand on those guys' shoulders.
And there were plenty of times where I'd be, in the act of doing something wrong, and someone from across the shop sees that and runs over and says, "Hey, do it this way," and you try it, and all the problems in the world revolving around that piece is
Yeah.
completely fixed. And so things like that. Another thing was really training my eye to see what they're talking about. So, they might say, there's a bend in this area, or, it's off center here. And so you really have to train your eye to see what they're talking about. And that certainly has helped, I think, the level of cleanliness my work has.
Yeah. Just overall evolved your standards of quality or
Right.
whatever. That's
Yeah.
cool. That's cool. So what other big takeaways? Are there any like how do you feel about blacksmithing going forward? Are you definitely like you're sticking to colonial style stuff or
Yeah, I think certainly I'll try to be more disciplined in pursuing colonial style stuff, or at least that level of handwork. I think just it's amazing how refined you can cause your hand and eye to get,
yeah.
and just to see how far you can push accuracy just between hand and eye, and how much you can refine your skill, kind of like we were saying, between repetition.
Yeah.
So that is really what intrigues me to this kind of handwork.
Okay, so I wanna take off on the repetition note. Like, so you said probably for the first month all you did was tasting spoons
Probably tasting spoons and nails.
and nails.
Yeah.
So like, probably a lot of people, unless like knives were their jam and all they wanted to do was make knives.
Right.
A lot of people would probably just be horrified at the idea of just making tasting spoons and nails for a month.
Yeah.
Did you ever get tired of it?
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
And what kept you going besides like, that's all that they wanted you to do. But
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of what kept me going is just trusting them, because I knew their reputation and I knew that, this is the right way to do it. And so I went into the internship trying to get the most I possibly could out of it.
yeah.
So kind of the hope that of, this will lead to better things, and then seeing the fruit of that throughout the summer. Every single technique I used on the spoon showed up elsewhere, in every other project. And it kind of got funny, within like 2.5 months, I was much better at shouldering than I was. And it just felt like kind of the same thing over and over again, but it just was repeating in.
Different combinations of the same process.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Just a few really foundational processes to
Right.
try to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of skill to be gained, a lot of things to be learned from repetition, and it's so easy to get bored with it and not, and then miss out on
Right.
what's to be had. So,
you were kind of talking about earlier what like attracted me to 18th century ironwork, and especially in a museum context, I liked the pace of not having to think, I need to finish 10 spoons this week or in 2 weeks, but I could take a month to make 10 spoons and learn on each one of them, and if 9 of them got thrown away at the end, I was going to be okay. So that's a very unique pace of work in a museum setting. You have a lot of distractions, you have visitors coming in, so the majority or a big portion of your job really isn't even to be excellent at forging, but is to interact with visitors and explain what you're doing. But you also don't have that same pressure to, make or produce them in a very quick.
The focus was on learning,
right,
and on teaching, and not so much on quantity
exactly
over quality.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see where the quantity pressures could be good at times too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Pushing you even further.
Mm-hmm.
In a day when people watch just YouTube videos, like to learn a craft entirely, what do you think of apprenticeships now that you actually went through a pretty epic one?
Well, I think there's a lot of value in finding internet resources or books or something and going out and trying that yourself. That's a big portion of how I started learning the craft. But at the same time, I think there's no better way to learn than in person with someone else.
Yeah.
I think the apprenticeship system was formed historically because these are such hard trades to learn quickly that you couldn't support yourself, without being an apprentice. You couldn't just jump into that trade and be trying to make money. So I think, still today, being in the shop with somebody, taking a class, and maybe it isn't a 3-month internship, but maybe it's just a one-day class or a weekend class. That's going to be the best way to learn quickly and not be frustrated and learn the correct and safe way.
Yeah. Shorten your learning curve.
Right.
In a lot of instances. Yeah.
Oh, is it now my turn to keep asking questions?
I'm kind of blanking.
Is this
okay.
able to be edited?
It's been a really long day.
Yeah.
We
well, it's a little bit.
We have two weeks worth of YouTube videos coming out after this video.
This is the second time we've just hammered 3 different videos in a single day.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been kind of sapped, but yeah. What out of all the projects that you showed us earlier, what's one you're most proud of?
Marion, are you being polite? Okay, sorry.
I think the meat fork that I did is the one that I'm most proud of. It was a copy of a copy, so one they had in the shop, but it is the closest I've ever been to something I would call a reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
So the line there is kind of hazy of what can you realistically call a reproduction? How close do you actually have to be? And that was certainly the closest I've ever been in my entire career forging. So I was very pleased with that. I'm also very proud of the trivet that I did, going from step A all the way to the end. It was really cool to see and just to learn the process that they do from, artifact to finished piece on the table.
Yeah. Very cool. So talk a little bit more about the idea of reproduction, because we were talking about this earlier today, but in some cases, in order for something to be a reproduction or copy, it needs to be exact to the original in every detail. Right. But what's something that you sometimes can miss out on in doing that?
Yeah, so to do reproduction, it begs the question of what are you actually reproducing? Are you trying to reproduce the item? Are you trying to reproduce how that item was made? Or are you trying to reproduce the mentality that it was made in? So a lot of times those go together, but if you're trying to get to the T, within a 16th of an inch, within a 32nd of an inch, chances are you're going to make that item much slower than the 18th century workman was. Just like you are today, they're focused on feeding their family, making money. So when they're making that initial item, that they're looking for excellence, but not necessarily something that is already, they don't necessarily always have parameters. So if their spoon is a 16th of an inch too long, that's not going to matter. If you're trying to make a reproduction of that exact spoon, it's going to have to be, within, probably a 16th of an inch, maybe more or less. And it kind of depends on who you talk to
Yeah.
on to what that is. So
And what the item is.
exactly right. So in Williamsburg, they often talked about reproducing the workmanlike manner. So trying to reproduce the mentality that was going into working on each piece. Why are you doing it that way? So are you trying to save material? You're trying to save cost. You're trying to save time. So making those choices will affect how you work.
Yeah. That's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot there that I certainly wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah.
6 years ago, getting into, starting my journey into, interest in the same area of ironwork for sure.
Where do you want to go with your craft?
So the goal would be to be a full-time blacksmith somewhere. I'm very intrigued by working in a museum setting. That is really enjoyable for me to be able to share my passion for the craft, and to let people make those observations themselves. You hand them a spoon and they're, oh wow, this is a lot lighter than I expected. And you can talk about the properties of iron and why was it used in cooking rather than something like silver. So I really like the academic and education aspect of museum work. But I'm also interested in maybe one day pursuing a production shop of my own. So
Maybe there's a way somewhere out there to marry the two.
yeah.
We done?
Oh, that's funny.
You done?
I don't know.
You done, bro?
If we were doing a YouTube live video or something, we'd be like, "So, do y'all have any comments or
right.
anything?" No, it's kind of hard at the end of the day here.
Yeah.
No, this was really cool. I mean, one thing that you do like to talk about, Jordan, are pet peeves.
Yeah. So that's kind of jumping track. So you want me just to ask that question?
Yeah, however you want to frame that, and maybe we end on that.
Okay.
The light's getting really low.
Yeah.
Okay.
So switching gears a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm curious, leading up to Williamsburg, but now definitely post internship.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your big pet peeves in the world of blacksmithing and the way it's understood, both by the public, but also most especially within our own community, if you want to call it that,
Mm-hmm.
within blacksmithing?
I think there's a lot of misconceptions surrounding our work. Certainly, really throughout time, blacksmiths have held this kind of mythological standing in culture. So, today we see it in movies and TV shows. I'd want people to know that a blacksmith makes more than just blades and knives.
Horseshoes.
And things right, yeah. Really understanding what a blacksmith used to do, it entails everything that we have iron and steel in our lives today.
Yeah.
So cooking, transportation, hardware for homes, things like that, agricultural implements. So that's probably a pet peeve of mine is when people just expect, blades and swords and things like that, which that's really all people see, and as is portrayed in modern culture.
Popular culture.
Right, yeah.
If they have any understanding of blacksmithing at all, it's usually extremely limited
Right.
in its scope.
Yeah.
So how do we change that?
Well, I think,
That
places
perception.
like Colonial Williamsburg and, other museums and things like that, it is a good place to start. That's where people can see hands-on or eyes-on, I guess, how it's actually being done. And maybe trying to bring the broader blacksmithing community into that as well. There's a lot of different facets of this trade in the modern day. There's people who do tool making, and there are farriers and bladesmiths, and the 18th century or historic smiths, and I'm sure there's a couple others I can't think of at the moment.
Categories. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I think probably just
doing more and getting it out there.
Yeah.
Getting it out there in front of people. I'm really passionate about, I think that as craftsmen, our faith in the craft really needs to be strong enough that it translates into a desire to like really spread it, But anyway, so wasn't my internship, but I feel like we ought to give a shout out, like I'm appreciative for you.
Yeah.
I know you are, of the opportunity at Williamsburg, and
Yeah.
So you want to shout out all the guys?
Yeah. So huge thank you to Ken Schwartz. He's the master of the shop there. I got to work with him a little bit this summer. Really, Mark Sperry and Ashland Lewis were the ones that they're the journeymen there. They're the ones that were really in charge of mentoring me and guiding me through this summer. And then the apprentices in the shop are Owen.
Alex and
Owen,
Broadus.
Alex and Broadus, yeah. So they were a fun bunch to be a part of, and they were super welcoming. So
trying hard not to be jealous. But man, really glad you could come by.
Yeah, thanks for
spend
having
a day.
me.
I wish we could spend a week or a couple of months.
Yeah.
But, yeah, looking forward to next time, and I know I don't have an internship at Williamsburg on the horizon, but boy, I hope I can spend some time with those folks myself too, even if it's just a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
So. I think there's pizza somewhere to be had.
Nice.
Pizza and probably
We never got our
milkshake.
milkshake.
Yeah, our milkshakes too.